At this afternoon's top stories, government commended on efforts in establishing the first youth policy, St. Lucia's Labor Ministry to crack down on illegal workers, and Trump blames Republicans for Obamacare setback. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Monday, the 27th of March 2017. I am Shaira Flanders. Nationally, the commitment of the government and the staff of the department responsible for youth affairs have been commended for the efforts made in establishing the nation's first youth policy by youth expert Dwinette Eversley. The effort began in October last year when the Federal Youth Policy Initiative was launched by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister responsible for Youth, Honorable Sean Richards, alongside Honorable Hazel Brandy Williams, Junior Minister of the Youth Affairs in the Nevis Island Administration, or NIA. Ms. Eversley was present at the time, having just arrived on island days earlier, assigned by the Commonwealth Secretariat to assist the policy drafting. Since then, Ms. Eversley was based in the Department of Youth Empowerment in St. Kitts, lending advice to the Youth Policy Steering Committee and the Department on related matters.
In this exercise, that support and collaboration has been exceptional. With the Special Advisor to the Minister, Mr. Connor, with Pierre Liebert, the Director of Youth here in St. Kitts, and of course with Zanella Claxton in Nevis, and all the other agencies. I have no complaint about the tremendous support, collaboration that they have given me while they have to be doing their work.
The youth expert said such dedication had a positive impact on her as she went about fulfilling her duties.
Apart from my professional desire to do the best work I can, that enthusiasm kind of engulfs you, and you want to do even better because you have invested so much in the exercise, and that's how I really feel being here.
The findings from the numerous consultations will be presented to more than 200 stakeholders at the National Consultation on the Federal Youth Policy 2017 to 2022 on Tuesday, March 28th at the St. Kitts Marriott Resort. The opinions from the representatives present will be used to validate the content in the draft document and finalize the strategies before it is presented to the Minister of Youth to take to the Cabinet for review and approval before it goes to the Federal Parliament. The Federal Youth Policy Initiative is supported by the United Nations Educational, Cultural and Scientific Organization, or UNESCO, the Commonwealth, and the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP. Investigators from the Violent Crimes Unit, or VCU, and officers of Police Division C Nevis are currently investigating a shooting incident in Cotton Ground, Nevis that left one man dead. According to reports, the shooting occurred at about 4 p.m. on Sunday, March 26th. The incident resulted in the death of Rondell Chapman, a 23-year-old male resident of Rollins Village. Initial investigations revealed that the victim was shot by an unknown assailant or assailants while at the Cotton Ground playing field. Police from the Cotton Ground Police Station responded to the scene upon notification. The scene was processed by the Forensics Services Unit. Head of the Nevis Division, Superintendent Trevor Mills, is urging persons who were in the area and may have seen the incident to report the information to the police. He said persons can do so by calling any police station or by calling Crime Stoppers at 1-800-8477 or by using the SKN Crime Reporter app on their smartphone. Superintendent Mills added, quote, "I encourage the public, if you see something, say something," end of quote. The investigation on this shooting incident continues. Meanwhile, upon responding to the shooting incident at the Cotton Ground playing field on Sunday, officers discovered and seized one Glock 9mm pistol with one magazine containing 15 matching rounds of ammunition. The firearm was found at the scene of the shooting incident that resulted in the death of 23-year-old Rondell Chapman. According to reports, the firearm was seized and ballistics analysis will be carried out. This find brings to 8 the number of firearms removed from the streets so far in 2017. The National Emergency Management Agency is collaborating with the Ministry of Education to implement a school safety program to ensure the safety of all students. This is according to Deputy National Disaster Coordinator Claricia Langley-Stevens, who said the school safety program is a regional initiative.
Most recently, we have been partnering with Ministry of Education to work with the school safety program, which is a new initiative for the Caribbean region. And NEMA, we play a very integral role in helping the schools to understand how important it is to be able to have an emergency plan, which includes an evacuation plan, which is what we tested them for today. How well did they evacuate their facilities, knowing that it is under threat to be covered by water?
NEMA and its stakeholders recently conducted the annual natural disaster exercise in Sandy Point as part of the Carib Wave 2017 initiative. The exercise also formed part of the school's safety program. Moving on to news on the regional scene, St. Lucia's Labor Ministry is cracking down on illegal workers. On March 21st, the ministry confirmed that it is embarking on a major drive to address the problem of employed foreign nationals working in the country without work permits. We hear more in this HTS St. Lucia report.
Labour Minister Stephenson King says his ministry knows that there are people working in St. Lucia illegally. He says the country's labour laws make it clear that overseas nationals who want to work in St. Lucia must obtain a work permit or exemption where applicable. He has issued a warning to employers and employees engaged in the illegal activity.
So before we move in and to deal with those persons who are working illegally in St. Lucia, we have given notice that the Ministry of Labour wishes to proceed in accordance with the law and to deal with those persons. Anyone found guilty or violating the laws are called upon, based on the legislation, upon summary conviction to a fine of $5,000 or imprisonment, or both.
The Labour Minister says the work permit requirement of the law serves an important purpose, and government will do what is necessary to ensure that the labour laws are upheld.
The purpose of work permits really is to manage and control the environment in the labour force, and to ensure that only if St. Lucia cannot provide the necessary skill sets and within the various sectors, only then shall we proceed to offer a work permit or to grant a work permit to a foreign national. There are other circumstances which can be considered if a work permit is applied, and those will be left to the determination of the minister to decide whether a foreign national is granted a work permit.
King says his ministry is mindful of the free movement of labour provisions of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy and the OECS revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. He says this campaign is targeted at employees and employers operating outside of the legal framework.
The process exists at all times. The Department of Labour has the mandate to do spot checks on businesses, to be able to identify persons who are working and who are unable to present their work permits. And once those persons are identified, they will be dealt with. But we give no notice of those visits.
Anyone in contravention of the labour laws is asked to visit the Labour Department's office at Barnard Hill Castries to begin the employment regularization process. The Labour Ministry says failure to comply will result in cases being forwarded to the Immigration Department for full enforcement of the law.
In Trinidad, a massive fire at a local pub left a few persons in the surrounding area battling with smoke inhalation on Sunday. We hear more in this CNews report.
Shortly before noon on Sunday, a fire broke out at this Woodbrook landmark. Workers at Marh Casino were the first to notice something was amiss as smoke came through the ceiling.
I was in a cash cage as normal, doing my normal duties, and I get this smell of smoke. So when I look at the ceiling through the lights, I realize there's smoke coming from the lights itself. So then I alerted the supervisor that, it have a fire somewhere, find out where this fire coming from. And she was like, she started looking to see, and then we heard a banging from Mascam side. I listened that it had a fire somewhere across in Mascam.
Fire officers were still to confirm the cause of the blaze up to news time, but many workers at the site said the fire seemed to originate from the kitchen at the legendary pub. Owner of the new pub, MacDonald Ward, said no one was at the facility as they had closed after a show at 4 a.m. But the Marh workers had another concern, as a nearby nursing home became affected by the smoke.
When we reached us, I had this lady from the nursing home about a street away asking for assistance because the elderly in that building couldn't breathe. So we had to run and assist them as well. Who on wheelchair, we had to tow them out help them, put them somewhere, give them water to drink and stuff. So that's basically what went on today.
Fire tenders were on the scene in 5 minutes as both Ryson Road headquarters and the Woodbrook Fire Station, both less than 2 minutes drive from the site, responded immediately. But they were met with a water challenge.
Yeah, we see some problem with the water in terms of low pressure, and WASA has supplied extra water in terms of their water truck.
Mr. Ward confirmed that 20 of his workers will be affected by the fire, while Marh Power Director Sherry Prasad confirmed that they will seek to redeploy their staff, numbering over 100, to their other outlets.
Yeah, nobody's going to lose employment out of this. Definitely not. Not in these times. We can't. Yeah, as hard as it is, we will see. We will try and see what we can do to, so employees don't have to worry at all.
The new pub, or the Mascam pub, has long been a cultural hub in the capital. Despite dwindling in influence in recent years, it continued to host significant calypso and other music showcases, such as New Fire, featuring local rappers, R&B and alternative singers. Just last month, they hosted a concert featuring the Mighty Sparrow, Trinidad Rio and Lord Relator. It is the third iconic building in the capital to be ravaged by fire in the past decade, after Smokey and Bunty in 2015 and Pat Raj Roti Shop in 2008. Peter Christopher, C News.
Moving on to news on the international scene, U.S. President Donald Trump is blaming members of his own Republican Party for failing to push through his health care reforms. Scrapping the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, was one of Trump's key campaign pledges during the 2016 election, and his failure to repeal the legislation is seen as his biggest defeat so far. Al Jazeera's Kimberly Hackett reports from Washington, D.C.
As the president left the White House for a second day of meetings on the golf course, leading Republicans and Democrats were sounding off on the Sunday talk shows.
Today on Face the Nation. You can't expect to try to solve a problem that addresses 1/6 of the country's economy and touches every American in a very personal and intimate way in 18 days.
That's exactly what the White House tried to do and failed. On Friday, House Speaker Paul Ryan pulled their health care legislation when it was clear it didn't have the support from more conservative members of the Republican Party for it to pass. At first, Trump blamed Democrats.
We were very close. It was a very, very tight margin. We had no Democrat support. We had no votes from the Democrats.
By Sunday, Trump took to social media to blame conservative Republicans for the unsuccessful bid to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, or what many Americans call Obamacare.
We needed to get rid of Obamacare. We needed to fix the system so we could help folks back home and then move on to tax reform so that we could help people get back to work. The president wants to do a lot of things.
The Democratic leader in the Senate,
For that to happen, Democrats say the president has to change his tactics.
You cannot run the presidency like you run a real estate deal. You can't tweet your way through it. You can't threaten and intimidate and say, I'll walk away. It's more complicated.
The issue of health care continues to divide Americans. At pro-Trump rallies across the nation, supporters clashed with counter-protesters. In West Virginia over the weekend, the vice president told supporters the administration isn't letting the health care setback detract from other policy goals.
Working with this Congress, President Trump is going to pass the largest tax cut since the days of Ronald Reagan, and we're going to get this American economy moving again.
But the president's critics argue that campaign promise may also be held up unless Donald Trump learns a lesson about working with Congress, that the way to accomplish big policy goals isn't to walk away, but instead to negotiate. Kimberly Helkett, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Police in Russia have arrested hundreds of demonstrators at massive protests held across the country against government corruption. Opposition leader Alexei Navalny was also detained on Sunday. The protesters are demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. Al Jazeera's Rory Challenge tells us how.
The protests and the detentions started in Russia's Far East. Crowds in Vladivostok booed and chanted shame as people were dragged away. They'd answered Alexei Navalny's call to speak out against corruption, and so did Russians in towns and cities across this huge country. Estimates suggest these are the biggest unsanctioned protests in 5 years. ordinary people spoke with anger about their poverty.
I don't have my own apartment, even though my husband works day and night. Putin and Medvedev tell us, you wait, you'll get an affordable mortgage, you will get everything, be patient and wait. Why does he live in a villa? Why do we live in state housing?
Navalny's recent claims that the Prime Minister controls a property empire amassed through a network of non-profit organisations have touched a raw nerve. His YouTube video has been viewed more than 11 million times. It says Dmitry Medvedev owns a collection of yachts, vineyards and mansions.
The size and the scope of Sunday's demonstrations appears to have taken Russia's authorities slightly by surprise. The dilemma for the Kremlin now is whether to make any concessions or whether to crack down, possibly a combination of the two.
Certainly there was no gentle touch on display in Moscow, where protests were biggest. At least 700 detentions have been reported in the capital. Among them, Navalny himself, bundled into a police van when he arrived at Pushkin Square. What to do with the activist is a problem the Kremlin doesn't seem to have an answer for yet. While he's endured harassment, here being covered in green disinfectant by unknown assailants last week, the Kremlin seems wary of making Navalny an opposition martyr by jailing him. But protests like these are the last thing Putin's government wants with presidential elections next year. Elections in which Alexei Navalny intends to stand as a candidate. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
And now for the weather. Present weather is partly sunny. Winds are from the south to south-southeast at 9 to 14 miles per hour. Today will be partly cloudy with a high of 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Today will be mostly clear. The overnight low is expected to be at 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunset today will be at 6:23 p.m. and the sunrise tomorrow will be at 6:18 a.m. That brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Shaira Flanders. Have a good one.